Okay, I'll go ahead and get started this morning by just officially welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see all of you guys here this morning. This is called our Pali Canon and English study group, where we study the original words of the Buddha in order to help people move their mind to this enlightened mental state. The teachings of the Buddha are learned, reflected on to independently verify, and then practice in order to train your mind. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them in order to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It no longer experiences any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. And that comes through training the mind, not believing. So what we do in order to start our classes is we start with meditation. I'm going to guide you guys in a meditation session in order to help you guys to do some training of the mind. The path to enlightenment, it's a consistent long-term journey. You can't meditate just one time and get to enlightenment. You can't even meditate your way to enlightenment. You need meditation, but you need other teachings as well in order to help you have the tools and techniques to train the mind. So this meditation that I'm going to share with you is breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used among all the other tools and techniques that he used in order to get to enlightenment. The way that we start is I'll start with some chanting to kind of ease us into meditation, and you guys are welcome to join. I see somebody handed out the daily chants for you guys. These chants are in the Pali language. This is the historical language that the teachings of the Buddha are captured in, and we chant these in order to ease the mind into meditation. The chants don't have anything mystical or magical associated with them. This isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit his teachings to their memory because it was an oral tradition at that time. They didn't write anything down during the lifetime of the Buddha, so they would chant every 2 weeks what the Buddha was teaching. So if he taught for, say, 30 minutes or an hour, they would then recite that word for word for word for word every 2 weeks in order to commit it to their memory. And that's how they remembered things, because they didn't have books and YouTube and podcasts and things like this during their lifetime. So I'll be easing you guys into the chanting or into the meditation with this chanting. And you can see the English translations on there. I suspect that the Buddha actually didn't create these chants himself. These were probably created by his students, because you'll see a lot of admiration and a lot of respect and gratitude for the Buddha. And a Buddha doesn't go around teaching his students to chant these things to him, because a Buddha would have eliminated his ego. He would have eliminated arrogance and pride. He would have been humble, and he wouldn't have seen himself as above other people. So these chants, as you see, there's a lot of respect and gratitude for him. So I suspect that his students might have created these during his life or after his death, because if you learn from a teacher of how to move from the anger and sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings that I mentioned, and then your mind was then experiencing this peace and joy for the rest of your life, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too, because the Buddha didn't ask for anything. He didn't want anything. He didn't expect anything. He didn't receive payment for his services or anything like that. Just out of the generosity of his heart, he shared the teachings that lead to this enlightened mental state. And then, of course, people shared food and water and clothing and shelter, medical care, resources to help him. Of course, people shared those kinds of things with him, but he was just focused on helping people get to enlightenment through sharing the teachings that would lead to enlightenment. So we'll ease into meditation with these chants. Then I'll provide some guidance while we're actually in the meditation. And then after that, there'll just be a period of time where we'll just all be meditating. Those of you guys here at the temple and those of you guys online that are joining us, welcome to you guys as well, that you can just be meditating and it'll be quiet essentially. Of course, you'll hear the occasional dog barking or maybe a car going by or things like that, but all these things are impermanent. The sounds that you hear are not permanent. So you'll hear me guide you in meditation to just bring the mind back to the breath rather than dwelling on the fact that you heard a car, because silence is not permanent, but also the sound of that car or that dog barking isn't permanent either. So it's not possible to meditate in complete silence all the time. So you'll be able to train your mind to let go of any craving for permanence. Then after we meditate, we'll come out of that with some chanting, and then we'll move into some teaching, and I'll explain to you what we do with that. So if you're meditating on the floor in a chair, this is a common position to meditate in. It's a seated position. There's actually 4 different positions to meditate within. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. And the Buddha taught all 4 of these positions. If you're sitting on the floor, you might sit with some cushions under your rear. This helps get the hips up in the air. Some people like to put their legs off the mat because it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles and allows the circulation to flow. If you're in a chair, people oftentimes like to put their feet flat on the floor or cross at the ankles. This isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way. It's about finding what's comfortable for you. So you can't all do it exactly the same way because our bodies are all different and unique. So find something that's comfortable for you with the lower body. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it, but there's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on the thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. So whatever's comfortable with your hands and arms to just be relaxed. Your body shouldn't be luxurious, but it shouldn't be painful either. It should be in the middle where it's nice and comfortable. So the lower body and hands and arms should be relaxed and comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind would have a tendency to be overactive or uptight. So by having the upper body erect, it keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. So again, I'm going to ease into the meditation with some chanting. You're welcome to chant along, or some people might just decide to close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. It's really up to you. It's your choice. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose, or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโอตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมโมโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวาปานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you'd like to slowly ease your way out of meditation, I will once again welcome all of you guys, including those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. Welcome to all of you guys. Those of you guys here at the temple and everyone that's online. For those of you guys that are here at the temple, I'd like to just share a couple of things with you guys. If you haven't been here before, there's a bathroom in the very back of the room, the very last door to the right. Joel actually is headed that way now. You're welcome to use it at any time. Just get up and feel free to use the restroom. There's even larger restrooms outside the classroom. If you follow the signs in the temple, it'll take you around to the large restrooms. We even have some water here if you'd like to help yourself. Students provide this, so you guys are welcome to enjoy any kind of water and just come and go as you please and do the things that you need to do in order to feel comfortable. So I'll share a little bit about this meditation with you before we move into talking about the Pali Canon and English study group. This meditation, a breathing mindfulness meditation, it's a primary form of training to help you get to enlightenment. The way that you can think about meditation is think about it like an exercise. If you were trying to build a muscle in your arm or your other parts of your body, you would go to the gym and you would work out and you would build up that muscle over a period of time. And then it can be beneficial to you in daily life that you can carry things that are heavier, you can move furniture, you can do different things. Well, your mind is the same way. Your mind needs to be trained. It's untrained. It's undisciplined. You're not able to control it. That when it's sad and your mind's angry and frustrated, you're not able to control your mind in that situation. So you can actually get to a point where you don't experience any of this anger and sadness and frustration because you've been able to train the mind and now you can control it. So in meditation, what you're doing with this particular meditation is you're developing awareness of mind, referred to as mindfulness. You're trying to become aware of what's going on in the mind. And you're also developing concentration, where you can stay focused on the breath. And now this wholesome quality of mindfulness and concentration is available to you in daily life, that you can practice having awareness of mind throughout your day. Because in the unenlightened state, we typically don't have awareness of the mind. We just kind of go through life, and whatever happens, happens. We don't really think through what we're actually doing on any particular time. So you're going to need that mindfulness or awareness of mind, and you're going to need that concentration or that focus and that clarity of mind. And then there's a certain unwholesome quality that you're working to eliminate with this meditation. The unwholesome quality is called craving, desire, attachment. These are the wants, the expectations, the longing, the yearning, the mind longing after the objects of its affection. The mind is chasing after certain wants and expectations. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you don't get what you want, you get angry, you get frustrated, you get irritated, you get annoyed. These are the discontent feelings that arise due to the mind's craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of its affection. In the unenlightened state, oftentimes people think it's other people that are causing you to be angry. This is a lack of wisdom that the unenlightened mind has, that other people aren't causing you to be angry. Other people aren't annoying you. Your mind is actually causing it itself. And this is why you can eliminate these feelings, because your mind is causing it itself. If it's other people that are causing you to be angry, with this lack of wisdom, what you'll do is you'll push people away out of your life, and you'll think that that's going to solve the problem. But that doesn't solve the problem, because if it solved the problem when you push that person out of your life, you would be peaceful for the rest of your life. But it doesn't. You get angry or irritated or annoyed about something else. It's only a matter of time. Or with this lack of wisdom, what you might do, thinking that other people are causing you to be angry, is you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards them. Or the other thing you might do is you might put your expectations on somebody and try to control them to get them to do things your way. So as long as your mind is doing this, where it's misunderstanding what the real problem is, which is that other people are causing you to be angry, as long as you have that lack of wisdom and you think that, then you'll push people away. You'll be bitter and harsh and hostile with people. They'll choose to leave out of your life. Or you'll put your expectations on people and they'll feel controlled and pressured. They won't feel comfortable around you, and they might end up leaving out of your life. So the number of people that you can spend time with in your life becomes fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. As your expectations grow and your wants grow, it's only a matter of time before you disagree with something that somebody does, and you'll push them away. You'll be bitter and harsh and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on them, trying to control them to do things your way. But none of this is going to work in order to get you to peacefulness, because you can't train 8 billion people in the world to do things your way. It's just not possible. So you only need to train one mind. You need to be able to train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So this meditation that I just shared with you, in addition to practicing mindfulness and developing that in the mind, where you have awareness of the mind and concentration, you're training the mind to easily let go of this craving, desire, attachment. Because with your mindfulness and awareness of mind, you can see when your mind moves off the breath, and then you can cut it off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. If this was your first time meditating, or you're just getting started with meditation, and you experienced a bombardment of thoughts, like lots and lots and lots of rapid thoughts, this is normal. You're not bad at meditation. It's just that your mind is untrained. You haven't trained it yet. So it's in there acting like a wild animal. It's running around the forest, frolicking in the forest, and doing all these kind of things where it's just being bombarded with thoughts. Or you might have had a thought and you indulged in that thought for a period of time. You followed it for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm meditating. Let me bring this mind back over here. That's the guidance of the meditation. So when your mind is longing and yearning like that, with your mindfulness or awareness of mind, you can notice it, and then you can easily cut it off and let it go. The goal of this meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. You can't eliminate your thoughts. As long as you're alive, you're going to have thoughts. But what you're looking to do is you're looking to purify the mind. There's certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered. There's 10 individual pollutions. And when you eradicate these from the mind, your mind will be purified, and you won't have unwholesome thoughts that are leading to unwise decisions. So as you purify your mind more and more using meditation, but also also other techniques as well that you would need to learn. You purify your mind of these pollutions, and now your mind will be experiencing wholesome qualities so that you can make wise decisions. So in the meditation, you're cutting off anything and everything. But in daily life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome thoughts that you would have. Any kind of wholesome thoughts you have in daily life, go forward. You would like to take your mom out to dinner, or you like to call up your sister, your brother, and say hello and tell them you love them, or whatever it is. Wonderful. Do those things. Those are wholesome things. So in meditation, we're training one way, and in daily life, we're doing something different, which is just cutting off any unwholesome thoughts. And if you're training in meditation this way, 2 or 3 times a day, you're building up your ability to control your mind. In daily life, you'll be able to notice when you're having an unwholesome thought, and you'll be able to easily cut it off and let it go. But that's going to take training. In the enlightened state, an individual will still have thoughts, but they'll notice it right away. They'll be able to easily cut it off and bring the mind back to the breath. So this meditation is there like an exercise, just like a professional pole vaulter will go into the gym perhaps, and they'll do weight training, they'll do agility training, cardiovascular training. Their training looks one way, but the sport looks completely different. It's pole vaulting. So it's the same thing as when you're exercising the mind in meditation, it looks one way. And then when you're actually in daily life, it looks something different. You're actually just cutting off the unwholesome thoughts. And just like when you were growing up, you know, when you were first learning to take a shower and brush your teeth and all these kinds of things, mom and dad were there to like tell you like, go take a shower, right? And then eventually you got to the point where you saw the benefit in the shower and the brushing your teeth, and you're like, wow, I kind of like feeling fresh. It's kind of nice. You know, that nice taste in your mouth. Wow, okay, I'm going to start doing this myself. Mom and dad didn't have to motivate you to do it any longer. And that's because you saw the benefits in it. Well, mom and dad aren't around to tell you to meditate. That's not the way it's going to happen. You're going to need to have the enthusiasm and the motivation and the energy and the initiative to meditate. And as you build up your practice, you're going to eventually see the benefits in it. Whether it's a week or a month or what have you, you will start noticing more and more improvement to the condition of your mind, to the point where life can be very peaceful and very joyful. By the time somebody gets to enlightenment, not only have they eliminated all those discontent feelings that I mentioned, like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure, but your mind is focused, concentrated, you have clarity of mind, you have deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will really blossom because your mind isn't polluted any longer. You're not being resentful and hostile to people. You're not pushing people away. You're not putting your expectations on people. You can train your mind to no longer do this. You can get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore. You're just always in a good mood. And this just takes training to get rid of the pollutions that are in the mind. So as you learn the teachings, the Buddha has this core central teaching called the Eightfold Path, which everything else plugs into that in one way or another. This is the path to enlightenment. This is what's going to help you to train your mind to actually get to this enlightened mental state. So you're learning teachings, investigating them, examining them. You're reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or whether they're false. And then you're practicing certain teachings. Yes, meditation, but there's other practices, other tools, and other techniques that he gives you besides just meditation. The Buddha never created rules and commandments or tried to guilt or shame or fear you into doing anything. As I mentioned, his teachings aren't about a bunch of beliefs. He wasn't even trying to pressure you or convince you or anything like that. His mind was already peaceful and joyful. He figured out how to do it by himself. And then he just spent the rest of his life from the age of 35 to 80 helping other people understand what it took for him to get to that enlightened mental state. And then he shared it with other people, for those people who were interested in learning. If someone wasn't interested in learning, he didn't teach them. It was only people that showed up to learn with him that he would then share the teachings with them. And he always did it without any guilt or shame or fear. That's not what he was about. He was about helping you eliminate those feelings, among other feelings. So he's not going to use guilt, shame, and fear to help you motivate to eliminate guilt, shame, and fear, right? That would be very unwise. It's not possible to do that. So this Pali Canon and English study group that we have here on Saturdays, it's a program that oftentimes people move into after they've already developed a certain foundation in the path to enlightenment. We have various courses and various programs that will help you to develop a foundation. And then people will tend to move into this program in order to learn the Teachings of the Buddha more fully, because those foundational programs, not only are you building a foundation, but you're kind of building a framework to understand the teachings of the Buddha and what it really takes to get to enlightenment. And then this particular program on Saturday kind of fills in that framework. So if this is the first time that you've come to the temple to learn the teachings of the Buddha, the method and the style of teaching that I'm going to do today is not necessarily something that somebody would start with, because it's a study group. It's where we actually read chapters of the book, and then I share teachings on that for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then I open up to questions that you guys have. And then we read another chapter, and some of these chapters are just a paragraph or two. And it just so happens that the point in time that we are in the program, we're in volume 11 of this book series. In the Pali Canon and English Study Group, we go through volumes 2 through 13 of this book series that's on the shelf over there, and that you can get on our website for free. You can download it. You can take it and go print it. You can order it on Amazon. You can get them here if you like. These are the original words of the Buddha, so that you can see what did he teach and what he didn't teach. And this particular volume 11, it's titled Realms of Existence. This is where you're learning about the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And as you heard me share, that the teachings of the Buddha aren't based in belief. So even these realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth, you can actually independently verify that these things are actually true. But this isn't a typical place where somebody would start to learn the teachings of the Buddha in volume 11 of a book series. They would normally start with volume 1. So today I'm going to share this with you guys, but just understand that you will learn something, you will gain some benefit, but it's not typically where somebody will start. And it just so happens that the section of the realms of existence that we're in, it's about the hell realm. So you guys are going to be learning about the Buddha describing the hell realm, like what this realm is like, what is experienced there, how one actually gets there. And the way that he experienced this is that he was able to observe his past lives. In his human life, he was able to observe these various past lives that he had in these various realms. And there's people today that have observed their past lives in other realms. So we can confirm that this is true through our own independent practice. As your mind has certain pollutions in the mind, you might only be able to see what you're experiencing in this life right now. It's like going out of your hotel or going out of your house. You can only see that street that you're on right now. But as you lift out the pollution out of your mind, you're moving to this higher consciousness, which is closer and closer to the enlightened mind. It's like relocating to the top of a mountain. And if you're at the top of a mountain, you can overlook a city and you can see how all the streets interconnect with each other. You can even see how one town connects to another town. This is what happens as you lift out the pollution out of your mind, that you start potentially being able to observe past lives. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha actually taught the cycle of rebirth in the realms of existence, because as you learn his core central teachings to eliminate the pollution, you might start observing your past lives. And if you start having memories, for example, of a very graphic and horrible murder that happened, and you have all these memories that are surfacing in your mind, you might think you're going crazy, or it might really shake you up. Or if you start getting communication from beings in the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, or the heavenly realm, you might think you're going crazy when you're hearing these voices from these other realms. These are things that can actually occur as you're lifting out the pollution out of the mind. So we taught the cycle of rebirth for this reason and some other reasons as well, so that as you're lifting out the pollution out of your mind and you start having interaction with beings in other realms, as you may have already had interaction with those beings, perhaps some people even before getting on the path to enlightenment have had interaction and communication with these beings in other realms. Or you might start having residual memories of past lives in these realms. So he taught what's called the natural laws of existence and helping you to understand what's truly transpiring in the world around you. The realms of existence are a very small portion of the teachings of the Buddha, even though it's a very large book. What he's really teaching you is how to train your mind to eliminate discontentedness. That's what he's teaching you. But if you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth, and you didn't understand that you've had previous lives, and you started experiencing these residual memories, or you started experiencing communication with other beings, and you didn't understand this, your mind can be shaken up by that. So his core central teachings are helping you to understand why your mind experiences discontentedness and how to eliminate it. But also he's teaching the cycle of rebirth so that you understand what's going on in this world around you. Because to live in a world that you don't understand is a real struggle. If you've ever watched the news, or you ever got information about your family and you're just like, I don't understand why mom keeps doing that. I just don't understand. Or I don't understand why they keep doing that. Like you're watching the news. Well, that's because you don't understand the world around you. And if you have a lack of wisdom of the world around you, you'll struggle and you'll have certain difficulties. But when you awaken to the wisdom of the natural laws of existence, you'll understand the world around you, and then it's not going to function the way you want it to function, right? This world isn't going to function the way your mind wants it to function. And as long as your mind is wanting the world to function a certain way and it's not functioning that way, you're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get irritated because the world doesn't function according to you. It functions according to the natural laws of existence. So when your mind has a lack of wisdom of these natural laws, you'll go around and you'll struggle in the world. You'll make unwise decisions and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So I'm going to transition over to sharing the words of the Buddha with you in volume 11, chapters 21 through 30. And the way I usually do it is I open up to any question, or I open up to you guys to read it, to read a particular chapter. I'll show you how it works. But before I even move into any of that, what I like to do is see if you guys have any questions on anything I've shared so far, because I've just kind of giving you a light little introduction to the teachings of the Buddha and a little bit about meditation. And I'd like to just pause and see if you guys have any questions. You guys can ask questions here at the temple. If you wouldn't mind, there's microphones in that white bowl in front of the camera. That way, if you use a microphone, the people online will be able to hear you. There's a little gray switch on the microphone that you just turn it on. The lights light up. You just wait a second and then you hold it up near your chin and you'll be able to talk through the microphone. We'll hear you here and they'll be able to hear you online. For those of you guys that are online, you can ask any questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or those of you guys in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions. We'll be able to hear you here at the temple through our speakers. So is there anybody that has any questions on anything that I've shared or anything that you're even seeing with Buddhism? If you've been traveling around Thailand looking at temples and you're wondering, why is there so much gold everywhere? What is that gold about? You know, why do these monks shave their heads or wear those orange robes, or anything that you've seen with Buddhism, either here in Thailand or if you've been reading things or seeing things on the news, you can ask any and all questions that you like. Any questions? No? Okay. Let me see what we have online, if we have any questions. Okay, we don't have any questions online either. So the way that we do our Pali Canon and English study group is we have these chapters, 21 through 30 is what we usually study. We study 10 each class period. And what I do is I open up to volunteers here at the temple and those people in Zoom to be able to read a certain chapter. And all you need to do is pick up the mic and then just read this particular chapter. It's just, you can see here, it's just a couple of sentences essentially. And then after you guys read the chapter, then I will share some teachings on that, helping you to further understand it. And then I'll open up to any questions that you have on that particular chapter. So these chapters, the way they're organized is, these are the words of the Buddha here. Then you've got this reference, which goes back to the original teachings. There's 45 volumes of books. In these 45 volumes of books, you can use this reference and it will take you back to the original source. So you can see that this is indeed the original source teachings of the Buddha. Then in these books, you've got words from me that are helping you to reflect on this and be able to understand how to practice it in your life. And as I mentioned, these books are all available at no cost for you to be able to access them and learn and practice to be able to develop the path to enlightenment and train your mind. So is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this particular chapter? So enlightened beings don't have shyness. One of the ways to get rid of your shyness is to put your mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. And you train it to be peaceful and joyful, that nothing's going to hurt you. There you go. The Irishman's going to do it. He's not scared. He's not shy. Yep, you got it. Just hold it up towards your chin, and then it'll pick you up.
Right. Doomed to deprivation in hell for an eon. Monks conquered by 3 forms of false teachings, his mind overwhelmed. Devadatta, cousin/brother-in-law to Gotama Buddha, is incurably doomed to deprivation for hell for an eon. Which 3? Conquered by unwholesome desires, his mind overwhelmed. Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation to hell for the duration of an eon. Conquered by friendship with unwholesome people, his mind overwhelmed. Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation to hell for the duration of an eon. And there being something further to be done, he nevertheless stopped halfway with a lower degree of distinctive attainment. Conquered by these 3 forms of false teachings, his mind overwhelmed. Devadatta is incurably doomed to deprivation to hell for an eon.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is talking about this individual who was actually his cousin or brother-in-law of the Buddha, that he actually ordained with the Buddha and became a student of the Buddha. But he actually had a lot of jealousy in his mind. He had a lot of hatred towards the Buddha. He actually wanted to be the leader of the community, but he couldn't be because he wasn't enlightened and he wasn't a Buddha. A Buddha is going to be the leader of their community, and they're going to guide their students to enlightenment through sharing teachings. So even though this individual ordained with the Buddha and he decided to learn with him, he had this hostility and resentment towards the Buddha, this jealousy and this envy. And he was always trying to find ways to kind of get rid of the Buddha and kind of assume the role of the leader of the Buddha's community. And there's actually reports of him trying to kill the Buddha on at least 2 different occasions during the Buddha's lifetime. So here what Gautama Buddha is talking about is he's talking about his brother-in-law and how he's basically going to be reborn in hell based on the things that are going on in his mind. The way that you experience rebirth and the cycle of rebirth is if you get to the end of your life and you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, that longing, yearning, that's the fuel that causes rebirth. The mind is holding on to the world, wanting things to be a certain way. The mind hasn't fully cultivated wisdom when it has this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, yearning in the mind. So that's the fuel that causes rebirth. Essentially, if you had a fire, and this fire had logs on it, those logs are the fuel. And now as long as these logs are on the fire, it's going to send off sparks, and the wind's going to carry that spark, and then it's going to land, and it's going to create a new fire. So it's a completely new fire, but it's coming from the fuel of this other fire. So the mind works the same way, that if there's fuel in the mind at the time of death, it's going to send off a spark, which creates a new mind or a new consciousness. So craving, desire, attachment, that longing, that yearning, that's the fire. If you observe your mind when you're having craving, like if you've ever been in the mall and you saw a brand new pair of shoes or a brand new piece of jewelry or a phone or a computer, a video game, and you were like, oh, I got to have that. I got to have that. Oh, I want it so bad. I want it so bad. You can almost feel the fire in the mind, right? Or if you've gotten angry, you can feel the heat in your face. This is the fire that's burning. And that's coming from your cravings, desires, attachment. So as long as there's fuel in the mind, which is craving, desire, attachment, it's going to produce a new life. And now this new life, you're going to experience rebirth in one of the 5 realms. And there's going to be a certain condition in that realm. Being in the human realm, it's the most ideal existence because we have the ability to get to enlightenment. We tend to have built-in motivation because we experience painful feelings in the unenlightened state. You experience anger and sadness, frustration, guilt and shame and fear and all those things. They tend to motivate you because you're interested in getting away from them. So if at the time of death, if there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that's the fuel that's causing rebirth. But what realm you're reborn into and the condition of your existence in that realm is based on the condition of your mind, the results of your decisions. We call it karma, or cause and effect, or action and result. Some people refer to it as karma. This isn't a mystical, magical thing. It's not punishments and rewards. Being reborn in hell is not punishment. It's just a result of your decisions, that if you're hateful, if you're vindictive, if you're angry and frustrated, and you have all this hostility and animosity in the mind, and you have that means you have a lot of craving. There's a certain amount of craving, extensive craving, to have a high degree of animosity and bitterness in your mind. So that means that you need to burn off that unwholesome karma, and beings are reborn into this hell realm in order to be able to do that. And then there's the animal realm, and there's the afflicted spirit realm. These are the lower realms of existence where those beings tend to have extensive amounts of craving, particularly in hell, in the animal realm, and then the realm of afflicted spirits, which some people would refer to as ghosts. If you've ever encountered a ghost, this is what that realm is. And we talk about these realms, and we use this word realm, and oftentimes people have the perception that these places are really far away from each other, but it's actually all within the same time and space. So just like there's a human being sitting in this chair, if I got up and left, there could be a dog or a cat that came and sat here, or a squirrel or a rabbit. So just like human beings and animals are in the same time and space, these beings of hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings are all in the same time and space. They're just formless beings. The hell, afflicted spirit, and heavenly realm, they're formless. They don't have physical form. So not everybody can see them, but some people can see the formless beings. There's like an apparition, right? And this is where some people have had those experiences and some haven't. So here, the Buddha is describing that his brother-in-law or his cousin, Davaita, is going to be reborn in hell. And the reason why is because of these things, that he's overcome by these unwholesome desires. Those unwholesome desires was he really wanted to be the leader of this community that the Buddha was teaching, and they had others as well. So that's just going to be one certain desire. A person who has unwholesome desires, they're longing, yearning, they're wanting certain things. His mind is overwhelmed, and then he's saying it's incurably doomed to deprivation, to hell, for the duration of an eon. An eon is an extended amount of time. The Buddha describes it as an immeasurable amount of time. It's just a significant amount of time. And beings in the hell realm tend to have a long period of life. And then he's conquered by friendships with unwholesome people, meaning that he chooses to make relationships with people who are into unwholesome things. So in the teachings of the Buddha, you're not judging others to determine that someone's wholesome or unwholesome. There's no judgment in his teachings whatsoever, because if you're judging others, then you're probably judging yourself. You might have negative self-talk. You might degrade yourself. But the Buddha teaches to develop friendships that are wholesome. But you can do that through discernment or wise decision-making rather than judging others. Because if you make friends who are into unwholesome things, your mind's going to tend to move in that direction. You're going to tend to do unwholesome things as well. If you've ever done that, if you've had people that are into drinking or using drugs or doing harmful things in the community, like stealing or things like this, it's very unwise to associate with people who are doing those kinds of things, because you're going to tend to do those types of things as well. So here, this particular individual who was a family member of the Buddha was into unwholesome things through making relationships with unwholesome people. And the more that you learn the teachings of the Buddha and you understand the natural law of karma, you'll come to understand the best way to make decisions to have wholesome friends. Essentially, what you would like to do to create wholesome relationships is you would like to have relationships that have politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, just to get started. That's like a baseline for any friendship that you're going to have. If you meet somebody and right off the bat, they're being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, it's probably unwise to have a relationship with that person. An enlightened being will be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful all the time to everybody, and no matter who they are, no matter what they're doing. An enlightened being would be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody. But unenlightened beings are going to be challenged, and they're going to sometimes be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. But you need to look at that with discernment and decide whether there's at least enough healthy politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect in your relationships that you guys can form a healthy and wholesome relationship together. Then the next thing you would like to look at in order to create healthy relationships in your life is look at what we refer to as the 5 precepts. There's these 5 precepts that the Buddha taught, and he used very illuminating language to be able to help you understand them. These are essentially 5 wise decisions that you can make in order to produce wholesome results in your life. And if you make decisions opposite of these, then you're going to be making unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results. So if you choose to be friends with somebody, for example, who's killing or stealing or having sexual misconduct conduct or lying or taking substances that cause heedlessness, then your choice to be their friend, their choices can now affect you. So if you're learning and practicing the 5 precepts and you're developing your mind to have this wisdom to make wise decisions around these 5 things, if you choose to be around wholesome people that are practicing these similar precepts, you'll experience wholesome results. The thing is that these 5 precepts may not be known to the average person, particularly if you come from a Western culture. They are not necessarily studying the teachings of the Buddha. But these 5 precepts, what they're doing is they're helping you to understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect or action and result, the types of decision that you can make that leads to wholesome results or unwholesome results. And these types of teachings show up not just in the Buddhist teachings, but you can see very similar teachings in Christianity, in Muslim teachings. You can see them, even grandma and grandpa. When I was growing up, my grandmother would say, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Right? This is like helping you to learn to speak in kind and polite and friendly and respectful ways. So even though you might understand the 5 precepts in the way that the Buddha taught them, and that's the wisdom that you're cultivating if you decide to practice the path to enlightenment, you can use that wisdom to make wise decisions about your friends and who to associate with. But when you do that, again, you're doing that without judgment. You're not looking at somebody else and saying, they're bad and I'm good, and therefore I can't associate with those people, because that's unwise. That's judging them. Instead, I don't look at it as good and bad or right or wrong. It's more about what's wise for you in your life and what's unwise for you in your life. So if you're around a friend, for example, that's stealing, that's lying, that's maybe taking drugs and intoxicants. Maybe they're even selling drugs and intoxicants. Maybe this is a friend from when you were 10 years old, but now you're 30, 40 years old and you're still hanging out with them. Well, now when you're with that person and they're maybe selling drugs, you get pulled over by a police officer in your car, they might slip the drugs under your seat. And now you're affected by that. You're the one going to jail. Or say you're walking down the street and a rival drug dealer sees you with this drug dealer, and now they try to shoot and kill that drug dealer who happens to be your friend, and now you get a stray bullet, right? So this is the unwholesome decisions that you would experience, or the unwholesome results that you would experience as a result of your unwise decisions. So you can choose to move on from a relationship and not associate with an individual without judging them, without trying to change them, without trying to force them, without telling them what they're doing is unwholesome or anything like that. You can just choose for your own life to just move on without judging them as good or bad, and just deciding that it wouldn't be wise for me to associate with someone who's selling drugs, for example, right? So these are the types of things that you can do. And the Buddha here is describing that this is what's leading his brother-in-law to being reborn in hell, that he's associating with these unwholesome people, which means he's also doing unwholesome things too, because his mind is leaning in that direction. Even though he's studying with the Buddha, he's into these unwholesome things. And then this third thing, he's saying, and there being some further to be done, he nevertheless stopped halfway with a lower degree of distinctive attainment. What he's talking about here is that he's practiced the path to enlightenment to a certain point, but then his mind became complacent and he's no longer progressing on the path to enlightenment. He's no longer training his mind. He's attained a certain level of improvement to his life and to his mind, but he's no longer pursuing the path to enlightenment. He's kind of given up on the path to enlightenment. He might have been wearing the orange robes, he might have been shaving his head, but not all individuals who are ordained, not all individuals who are sharing the teachings of the Buddha are sharing the actual teachings. They're not necessarily practicing them. You can sometimes hear about monks who are using drugs or having sex, or even having sex with children occasionally. These things are rare, but when they occur, the Thai people take care of it really quickly. These people oftentimes end up in prison and end up in jail. At a very minimum, they're going to defrock them, which means that they're going to ask them to step down from this. But your practice of how to get to enlightenment and your journey to enlightenment doesn't need to be contingent on what other people are doing. So if you see somebody else on the path that are doing things that are opposite of what the Buddha taught, like say you see an ordained practitioner who's in the news for using drugs, the Buddha actually talks about this during his lifetime. He says if he's a cow and he's walking on soft earth and he's putting hoof prints into the earth, and there's a donkey behind him, and this donkey is putting his footprints in the same hoof prints as the Buddha, and the donkey's thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. Just because the donkey is putting his feet in the same hoof prints, and he's thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, does that make him a cow? The answer is no, it doesn't make him a cow. He's still a donkey, right? So an individual could shave their hair. They can put on an orange robe. They could wear white clothes. They could shave their hair. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily practicing the original teachings of the Buddha. So what the Buddha is describing here is that this is somebody who's gone to a certain degree. He's practicing to a certain degree, but he's not continuing his development. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you can imagine, there would have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people learning with him, but not everybody was deeply practicing the teachings very closely. And this is an example of that. One of the Buddha's own family members, he wasn't practicing the teachings very closely. So the Buddha is giving you guidance here of what is actually occurring that is leading this individual to get to the hell realm. And here the Buddha is saying, conquered by these three forms of false teachings, meaning he's not actually practicing the true, real teachings, that his mind is overwhelmed and he's going to need to be reborn into this hell realm in order to be able to improve the condition of his mind, and then ultimately get back to another realm that he can then get to enlightenment, because the hell realm is impermanent, just like the heavenly realm is not permanent either. He will go to hell and be reborn there and spend this enormous amount of time, an eon, but as he's there working through all the things he needs to work through in order to burn off his unwholesome karma, he will eventually then move into potentially the animal realm or the afflicted spirit realm or the human realm or the heavenly realm, and he'll be able to then continue his development and ultimately potentially get to enlightenment at some point. So the Buddha is describing this, and the way that you use a discourse like this is you use it for your own development. Right? You're like, okay, well, what's this person experiencing that's leading to his rebirth in hell? Oh, okay, he's got unwholesome desires, which are central desires, and you can learn about those on the path to enlightenment. And by the time somebody would get to this book, they would have already learned those kinds of things. You can learn to cultivate wholesome relationships with your friends, and I gave you a little bit of guidance on that. And then you can learn how to continue your development on the path. Don't give up. Don't become complacent. Continue to develop and move forward on the path to enlightenment. So let me pause here and see what questions you guys have. I saw a hand go up. If you could use the mic for your question. We have different mics. You guys can keep those mics with you and then just pass them around as you need to.
Okay.
There you go.
It's a little bit random question. You were talking about bad habits. Of course, monks are humans, so they can. The other day, I saw a monk. He was smoking. Is like a bad habit something allowed, or I don't know?
So there isn't any one person in Buddhism that's telling everybody else what they should and shouldn't do or try to control them. There isn't like a set of rules that says you have to do this, but there is a path that the Buddha shared. And each one of these temples, each one of the monks at the temple, they're on their own independent journey. And how well they develop their mind is based on their decisions. The way that I would do things if I was leading a temple is the monks that would be learning with me, I would be having them check in. You know, of course, they'd be meditating in the morning, they'd be meditating in the evening, we'd have regular meditation and teachings, they would be attending those kinds of things, but they would also be guided to come talk with me maybe once a month, once every 2 or 3 months, up to them to choose to come talk to me. But I would guide them on the path to enlightenment. But because we're 2,500 years away from the death of the Buddha, a lot of these temples, a lot of the abbots at the temples, they don't actually understand the teachings of the Buddha very closely because they haven't necessarily studied the words of the Buddha. So what you have is you have some ordained practitioners who don't understand the teachings of the Buddha, and they might be smoking. You know, I've seen monks smoke occasionally, but it's not part of what the Buddha taught. If you're smoking, it's not that it's good or bad, it's just that the mind has craving, it has desire, it has longing, it has yearning. And if you're smoking as a monk, that means somebody's paying for that donations are being given to that monk in order to pay for those cigarettes. And what the Buddha teaches you is that if you're going to make donations to a teacher, that you should see the teacher who's practicing the teachings very closely, that they shouldn't have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, this unknowing of true reality. Because if you supported a monk who was gambling or using drugs or alcohol or things like this, smoking, your donations are going to that. Where what the Buddha taught is that when you're practicing generosity to provide donations, that it should go to help the students learn. So a teacher who's receiving donations, they should use a little bit of that money to sustain their life for like food, water, clothing, shelter, medical care. But then the rest of that should be coming back to the students, like meditation cushions, a nice environment to learn in, air conditioning, fans, a system to share the teachings, free books to be able to help you to learn and things like this. So not everybody in the Buddhist tradition is practicing the teachings like the Buddha, right? Some people are those donkeys thinking I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, when in reality they're really a donkey. It would be wonderful if everybody that practiced the teachings as an ordained practitioner was a cow, but unfortunately that's just the way it is, based on the universal truth of impermanence. This is a very basic beginning teaching of the Buddha, that he teaches that nothing around you is permanent, right? Like this carpet. At one time it was different pieces and parts and it was put together as a carpet, but now it's fading away. Right? It's getting stains on it, the fabric's coming off. So things arise, they change, and they fade away. Like this human body that you have, it arises, it changes, and it's going to fade away. You're going to die someday. Or if you see like a fence that's painted, it's painted a certain color, but then it fades because it's impermanent. So there isn't this steady, constant, fixed state. So an individual might think that, okay, every single monk must know the teachings of the Buddha, or every single monk must be practicing the teachings of the Buddha, to perfection. But this would be the mind not understanding the universal truth of impermanence, not realizing that everybody's at a different place in their practice. So if I saw a monk smoking, I've seen monks gambling, I've seen monks hitting dogs, I've seen these kinds of things. I don't judge them, I don't look down on them, I just understand that that's where they are in their practice, and whatever decisions that they make, they're going to experience the results of that. And what your goal is to learn the teachings so that you can train your mind rather than look at what other people do. But to answer your question more shortly, in a more short sense, the Buddha didn't teach to smoke. That's not something that would lead to enlightenment. But that individual choosing to smoke, that's a craving that they have. They haven't let it go yet. They haven't learned how to do that, and now they're experiencing the results of that decision. And anybody who's supporting that, they're also experiencing the unwholesome results because their money and their funds are not going to helping the teachings be shared in the world. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Great question. These are things that you see in the world. So any questions you guys have about anything, you're welcome to ask. There's some mics if you could pass those around. Microphone check.
Yeah, it's on. The one I struggle with is the friendships and letting go of people because they're not wholesome. And I struggle with the idea of where compassion comes in with that. Mm-hmm. I've kind of let go of lots of people in my life because I felt that, they weren't doing me any favors, and it's been a good thing.
It'll work. Just keep going. That's just impermanence. That is going to cut out every once in a while. The sound people are going to come today. Oh, did the batteries go out? Oh, wow. Okay. We have some more batteries there. Some impermanence. I have the sound people coming today. We're getting some more microphones after class. We have some new batteries there too, if you guys would like to switch them out.
Great. And so say if you're in a friendship group and one of them isn't doing too well and they're kind of bringing you down and you feel exhausted and they're negative and everything like that, some friends might say, well, it's time to move on. But I'm a bit of a rescuer, and I think, I don't want them to be lonely or rejected or something like that. And I think about compassion, that isn't it about kind of having a sensitivity towards their suffering and trying to help them in a way or something like that. So I have a real conflict with what would be the best approach for that kind of.
Sure. So what compassion is compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, so that you're not worried about them. You're not having stress or anxiety because of what they're experiencing, but because that wouldn't be the middle way. What the middle way is to have this compassion where you have concern for them. Having concern for an individual doesn't mean that you're going to fix them, because you can't fix anybody. It's each individual's decisions. They have to choose that I'm going to now learn to become a better and better individual through development of my own mind. So while you can help somebody who's soliciting your guidance and asking for help and asking for support, that person you can help because they're open to your support and they're asking for your support and they're going to do something with that guidance that you're sharing with them. But if this person isn't interested in developing and learning, you can't help them. There's nothing that you can do because it's their decisions that are leading to the results. It's not your decisions that are leading to the results, what they're experiencing. It's their decisions that are leading to the results that they're experiencing. So while you can be in a relationship where you're supportive and encouraging and helping an individual, you need to always remember that in order for them to get better, they've got to do the work. They've got to accept responsibility for what they're experiencing. So you can surely be there to help somebody and offer your support and offer your guidance. But what you've got to decide is my mind attached to this person, which it could be, right? It sounds like you have some clinging there where you're holding on to this person, wanting them to be a certain way. Would it be wise for you to stay in that relationship, or is it best to kind of move on and let go? And that's the best way for them to get the help that they need. Because if you just continue to be around them, maybe they're bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive, and they're not learning the natural law of karma. Because the more bitter and harsh and hostile they are, the more someone might be trying to help them and sticking around them. What they need to learn is the more bitter and harsh and hostile they are, people go away from them. And then when they can see like, wow, I'm quite lonely, like nobody will be around me. Why is that? Then they can start learning. There are ways that you can skillfully help an individual, but their mind has to be open to a certain degree. You can't produce enlightenment for another person. You can't produce improvement in somebody's life for them because you're impermanent in their life. They ultimately need to cultivate wisdom. And as they cultivate wisdom, they will make wiser and wiser decisions that produce better and better results in their life. So this is where you have to look at each relationship, and you're not looking for the perfect friend, right? Because that person doesn't exist. Enlightened beings, their mind is functioning ideally and perfectly. They're not causing harm to anyone, but you're not going to have all enlightened beings as friends. You're going to have some friends that have struggles and have difficulties. And it doesn't mean that you need to go away from them just because they're having struggles and difficulties. You got to look at your mind, and is it wise for me to stay in this relationship? Am I too attached? Am I longing? Am I yearning? Am I trying to control this person? Am I putting my expectations on this person? Am I trying to force them to be a certain way? If you can restrain your mind and pull your mind back from that so that you can just be supportive and encouraging and love them as they are, that's what you would like to get to in all your relationships, where you can just love them as they are, but still being there to support them, still being there to encourage them and help them, but they need to be open to that help. If they're not open to that help, you can't help them. But you could still potentially be their friend, right? And just ensure that you're not putting your expectations on them. You're not wanting them to be a certain way. But as they're open to your guidance and your advice, you could offer that to them. And that's where you got to watch your own ego. Because if you've got ego in your mind, which all unenlightened beings typically do, then you might think that you know what's best for other people, and you see them into different things. You're like, oh, that's not going to go good for them, or I know what's better. So you got to look at your own mind and see, is what I'm thinking about this relationship, is it my own ego? Is it my own cravings, desires, attachments, wanting this person to be a certain way? Or are they really struggling? Are they really having difficulties? And if they are, you can still love them as they are, and then just kind of offer your support and guidance at different times. Sometimes they might be open to it, sometimes they may not. Where you would like to potentially move on from a relationship is if you're noticing that your mind is having craving, your mind is having longing and yearning, you're having hostility in the relationship, and you can't maintain your calmness and composure. That's because you're attached. You have craving. You're going to need to potentially move on from this relationship. Or if you're noticing that the decisions that this person is making is impacting you. Based on your decision to be their friend, their decisions are impacting you. Like, say you were in a partnership with a life partner, and say they're stealing, and say they're lying, and say they're taking substances that cause heedlessness, and now this is affecting your ability as a couple to acquire income and pay your rent. And now you might be out on the street and not have a house to live in because your partner isn't kind of upholding their part of the relationship to be able to bring resources into the home to provide you guys a shelter. In this situation, it's your choice to be their life partner, but now their choices of stealing and lying and taking substances that cause heedlessness is now affecting your ability to live and have a shelter, for example. So there's some relationships that aren't life partners, for example, that you can maintain a relationship with somebody and you have enough wisdom that their unwise decisions aren't going to affect you. And this is where you need to be able to navigate that with your own wisdom, that I can't give you like a plug and play, right? I can't say, if this happens, stay in the relationship. If that happens, leave the relationship. You need to be able to evaluate that through your own wisdom of whether your mind's angry and bitter and hostile and harsh and gosh, it'd be better for you to move on. Maybe they're being the same way and it's better to just move on from this relationship. Or are you experiencing unwholesome results from their decisions, and it would be unwise to continue in the relationship. And then if you decide to move on in a relationship, sometimes people feel like you need to go to that person and kind of download all the reasons why I can't be your friend. Like, I can't be your friend because of this and this and this and this and this and this. All you're doing is listing out your expectations. You're listing out your cravings, desires, attachments, things that you want them to do that they're not doing. And this is very unwise. And you're telling this person, hey, I'm judging you, that you're not doing the things I want you to do, so therefore I can't be with you. This is your craving, desire, attachment. So if you're noticing that you're choosing to move on for whatever reason, it's better to just lightly move on, politely move on. You don't have to tell them that you're moving on. You can just gradually kind of ride off into the sunset. And now they kind of move on and you kind of move on. And then 5 years from now or 3 years from now, if you happen to run into them somewhere, you can still be friends. You can, hey, how's it going, Bob? Or how's it going, Susie? Hey, Barbara, nice to see you. How you been? Whereas if you've gone to them and you've downloaded all these things and now there's this conflict, now when you see them, it just kind of feels awkward. Like, you downloaded all these things to them and now they feel like you're judging them and there's this hostility and this conflict that's occurred. Instead, if you're talking to this person weekly or something, you can just spread that out every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, once every 4 weeks, and just slowly move on. And this will help your mind to let go and help their mind to let go. But the decision of whether to stay in the relationship, it comes down to how committed you are to the relationship itself. Because on the journey to enlightenment, there's certain relationships you have right now that you might decide to let go of and then just gradually move on, like I just talked about. But there's other relationships that you're more committed to. And maybe there's problems in those relationships. Maybe there's hostility. Maybe there's difficulties. But you're committed and they're committed to resolving these. And you guys are going to do the work and figure this out. But then there's a third category of relationships that are completely brand new relationships that you haven't even made yet. Brand new people that you'll meet from this point forward in your life. And you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And you can learn how to not be attached and how to not have craving, how to not put your expectations on people, how to not be bitter and harsh and hostile to people, how to not push people away. You can learn how to do this. So this third category of people are people that you haven't even met yet, that you'll only ever be loving and kind and compassionate in those relationships. So this compassion that we're talking about in this loving kindness, it's the middle way, where oftentimes the unenlightened mind isn't practicing that middle way. It has this cravings, these desires that the mind is chasing after and wanting a friend to be a certain way. Or you might be over here where you're indifferent and you just could care less about your friends or a certain family member or something like that. And neither side, you're going to feel peaceful and joyful. So you're bringing your mind to the middle, learning more and more how to practice this compassion and how to practice what compassion is, which is this concern for the misfortune of others. And then also learning loving kindness, which is this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And in order to practice loving kindness and compassion with others, You need to have it for yourself first. So where your decisions to be friends with somebody is affecting you, and you see their decisions are affecting you, you've got to have loving kindness for this being first. So you might need to move on from a relationship because it's wise for you, because your mind is struggling in this relationship and you can't see how to get to a healthier state in this relationship. And as long as you stay in this relationship, it's unhealthy for your mind potentially, and it's unhealthy for their mind because there's too much attachment here. And that's where it's best to just move on and then train your mind more, focus on your own mind. As you're on the path to enlightenment, I describe it like a bow tie, that when we were all younger, when we were children, we didn't have a bunch of expectations of our friends. Like when we were 6 years old, when we were 10 years old, we didn't have a bunch of expectations for people. So our life was like wide open. We could spend time with anybody and everybody because we were just children. We didn't have all these expectations. We were just going around the world. It was just all about fun and playing, right? So we had our life wide open. But we didn't have the wisdom of how to select our certain friends. So as we started aging, we started realizing, oh, that friend's doing that, and oh, that friend's doing that, and oh, that friend's doing that. We started limiting our friends more and more and more. This is like a bow tie coming into the knot. The knot is like doing this work on the path to enlightenment, that you've limited your friends potentially at this point, and you have limited contact with people. And now in that knot, you start doing this work to improve your own wisdom, and you improve your own life through the path to enlightenment. And as you develop your own mind and you do this work on your own mind, then eventually you start expanding back out the other side of the bow tie. And now when you expand back out, you can be friends with anybody and everybody, that you don't have this judgment towards people. You're not pushing people away. You're not being bitter and harsh and hostile. You're not putting your expectations on people. You can be loving and kind. And you have enough wisdom that if somebody's into unwholesome things, that your mind's not going to do those unwholesome things because you just know that it's unwise to do those. And you have enough wisdom that you don't allow their decisions to affect your decisions. So while at one time your life might have been more wide open, if you're noticing that you're having fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer friends, this is normal. But you got to get into the knot. You got to do the work on your mind in the path to enlightenment so that you can gain wisdom and you can train your mind how to help people without having attachment, without having craving, without trying to control them or put your expectations on them, and without your ego. So you learn how to do that work among all the other work that you do on the path to enlightenment, but then you gradually expand back out, making more and more friends. And now you have all these wholesome friends and wholesome things, and you create this perfect life for yourself through the wisdom that you cultivate on the path. And that's what you need to gradually do. And this comes with practice. So if you have like specific examples of relationships that you're in and there's certain challenges that you're experiencing, we can talk privately if you'd like. People are welcome to talk publicly about those kinds of things too, but perhaps you'd like to talk privately and share with me all the different things that you're experiencing in these different relationships, and then I can give you more specific guidance on each individual situation. I wouldn't tell you what to do or how to do it, but just give you thoughts and guidance based on the teachings of the Buddha, and then whatever decisions you make are up to you. All right. Any other questions on this chapter? Okay. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 22. Is there someone who would like to read this one? You read it, Josh? Okay. Yeah.
Simile for the suffering in hell. Monks, there are these three characteristics of an unwise person, signs of an unwise person, attributes of an unwise person. What three? Here, an unwise person is one who thinks unwholesome thoughts, speaks unwholesome truths, and does unwholesome actions. If an unwise person were not so, how would the wise know him thus? This person is an unwise person, an untrue man, but because an untrue person is one who thinks unwholesome thoughts, speaks unwholesome words, and does unwholesome actions, the wise know him thus. this person is unwise, an untrue man. An unwise person feels pain and grief here and now in three ways. If an unwise person is seated in an assembly or along a street or in a square and people there are discussing certain pertinent and relevant matters, then if the unwise person is one who kills living beings, takes what is not given, misconducts himself in sensual pleasures, speaks falsehood, and indulges in wine, liquor, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, which are the basis of heedlessness, he thinks. These people are discussing certain pertinent and relevant matters. These things are found in me, and I am seen engaging in those things. This is the first kind of pain and grief that an unwise person feels here and now. Again, when a robber culprit is caught, an unwise person sees kings having many kinds of torture inflicted on him, having him flogged with whips, beaten with canes, beaten with clubs, having his hands cut off, his feet cut off, his hands and feet cut off, his ears cut off, his nose cut off, his ears and nose cut off. Oh boy. Having him subjected to the porridge pot, to the polished shell shave, to the rahu's mouth, to the fiery wreath, to the flaming hand, to the blades of grass, to the bark dress, to the antelope, to the meat hooks, to the coins, to the lye pickling, to the pivoting pin, to the rolled up payasse, and having him splashed with boiling oil, and having him thrown to be devoured by dogs, and having him impaled alive on stakes, and having his head cut off with a sword. Then the unwise person thinks thus: because of such evil, unwholesome actions as those, when a robber culprit is caught, kings have many kinds of tortures inflicted on him. They have him flogged with whips and have his head cut off with a sword. Those things are found in me, and I am seen engaging in those things.
Okay, let me explain what this is before we go on. Okay, so here what the Buddha is describing is what's referred to in his core central teaching as right intention, right speech, and right action. These are areas that you're learning the natural law of Gama, of certain wholesome thoughts, where he teaches you how to develop the mind in order to get to this enlightened mental state. So if you have that wisdom of this core central teaching of right intention, right speech, and right action, and you know the cause and effect of what leads to wholesome results and what leads to unwholesome results, what he's saying is that you're able to understand when somebody else is having unwholesome thoughts or unwholesome speech or unwholesome actions, because you know for yourself what is wise based on the natural law of Gama. And when you see other people doing these unwholesome things, then you know that it's unwise and that it's unwholesome. And now, knowing that this individual is into unwholesome things in terms of thoughts, speech, and actions, now he's saying, okay, this individual is going to experience these particular feelings of pain and grief in three ways. And he starts explaining the 5 precepts a little bit. Here he's referencing the 5 precepts when he talks about killing, he talks about stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. And he's saying, okay, when you're doing those things, if you're killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, if you're lying and having intoxicants, when you go into a certain group of people and they're starting to talk about certain things, you're going to think that they're talking about you, right? Like if you're around a group of people and they're talking about unwise things and unwholesome things, you're going to feel conflicted inside. It's like, oh, they're talking about me because I do those unwholesome things. So this is a pain that the Buddha is describing that one would experience, is being in a group of community and hearing people talk about unwholesome things and realizing that you do those same things that they're talking about. Then he's talking about this analogy. He's saying, okay, just like a robber is caught, when this unwise person sees the kings, this is how they would essentially go to court. Like nowadays, we have more of a democracy in the world, whereas if you get caught doing a crime, you go to court, you have to be proven guilty, and then there's some judge who's independent of all of that, who's then going to issue a sentence to maybe jail or prison or something else. Where during the lifetime of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, if you got caught stealing in the kingdom, you would go see the king, and the king would now hear what happened, and then the king's going to give some kind of punishment. And these are the types of punishments that could be experienced. And thank goodness we don't live during this time, right? Because when I was a kid, I did a little bit of stealing, right? And having your hands and feet cut off, having, caned, and your nose cut off, your ears cut off. Like, wow, this is pretty significant, right? To have those kind of things happen. And these are descriptions of other punishments that would occur during that time frame that the king would essentially administer as a punishment. So the Buddha is saying, okay, this unwise person thinks, because such evil, unwholesome actions as those, when an evil culprit is caught, kings have many kinds of tortures inflicted on him. They have him flogged with whips, so that entire list, that's what the ... is, having his head cut off with a sword. Those things are found in me, and I am seen engaging in those things. So it's like being reminded that other people are doing unwholesome things and they're getting punished. I'm doing certain unwholesome things, and now I'm going to potentially get punished too by potentially going into this realm of hell. So if you start to understand this cycle of rebirth, then you start to understand that any decisions that you're making can produce unwholesome results. In the teachings of the Buddha, you're not being judged over the totality of your life, of what you've done, and then you're experiencing some result at death. It's about the condition of your mind at the time of death. If you haven't developed your mind along the path to enlightenment, your mind's going to have a lot of anger and hatred and bitterness and hostility at the time of death. But if you've done a certain amount of work, your mind can be improved by the time you get to death. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there was an individual who had murdered 999 people during their life, and they ended up becoming a student of the Buddha, and they trained their mind, and they got to the point where they attained enlightenment. So I know that none of you guys have killed 999 people. There's probably no one in the world at this point that has killed that many people. So anybody and everybody can actually get to enlightenment in terms of human beings. We can all get to enlightenment in this life. And if somebody can transcend 999 murders and they can train their mind to get to a point where their mind is enlightened, you can do that too. So the Buddha is just describing to you kind of what you might feel when you're around people who are into wholesome things and you know that you're doing unwholesome things. You can kind of have this conflict inside, this internal conflict and difficulty and struggle. Okay, so we can pick it up here, Josh.
This is the second kind of pain and grief that an unwise person feels here and now. Again, when an unwise person is on his chair or on his bed or resting on the ground, then the evil or unwholesome actions that he did in the past, his bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct cover him, overspread him, and envelop him. Just as the shadow of a great mountain peak in the evening covers, overspreads, and envelops the earth, so too, when an unwise person is on his chair or on his bed or resting on the ground, then the evil or unwholesome actions that he did in the past, his bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct, cover him, overspread him, and envelop him. Then the unwise person thinks, I have not done what is good. I have not done what is wholesome. I have not made myself a shelter from anguish. I have done what is evil or unwholesome. I have done what is cruel. I have done what is wicked. When I pass away, I shall go to the destination of those who have not done what is good, ... who have done what is wicked. He sorrows, grieves, and has displeasure. He cries, beating his breast, and becomes distraught.
Okay, so what the Buddha is describing here is that if you've done a bunch of unwise and unwholesome things, you might be lying down somewhere, like on a bed or on a beach or somewhere else, and thinking about all those things. Your mind's kind of ruminating about all those unwise things you did, and this kind of envelops you, right? That's what he's describing here. And that you understand that you haven't done these wise things, and that you might be scared and fearful about what's going to happen to you once you die. And this is the displeasure, the pain that you experience as a result of doing unwise and unwholesome things in the past, that now in the present moment, your mind might be kind of beating yourself up for those kinds of things. But what you can get to is you can clear all that out of your mind and realize those decisions that you made in the past that were unwise, that doesn't define who you are. So whatever unwise decisions you made in the past, you can transcend all of that, right? Everybody's made unwise decisions to a certain degree in the past. No human being that's ever been born has been perfect from the time of birth until they die. Even though some people teach that Jesus Christ was perfect from the time he was born until the time he died, this isn't actually true. Jesus Christ got angry at the temple. He, threw vendors out of the temple. He tossed over tables, and he did some unwholesome things and unwise things too during his life. This is one of the reasons why he was crucified on the cross, right? So each individual human being that is born has craving, has anger, has this unknowing of true reality or this ignorance, these certain pollutions in the mind, and they're doing unwise and unwholesome things. And as you do those things, you might get to a point where those unwholesome things overwhelm your mind, and then you experience these results that the Buddha is describing here. Okay. So now, Josh, if you'd like to read that one.
This is the third kind of pain and grief that an unwise person feels here and now. An unwise person who has given himself over to misconduct of body, speech, and mind on the dissolution of the body after death reappears in a state without basic necessities, in an unhappy destination, even in hell. Were it rightly speaking to be said of anything that is utterly unwished for, utterly undesired, utterly disagreeable, it is of hell that, rightly speaking, this should be said, so much so that it is hard to find a simile for the suffering in hell. But, venerable sir, can a simile be given? It can, monk, the perfectly enlightened one said. Monks, suppose men caught a robber culprit and presented him to the king, saying, "Sir, here is a robber culprit. Order what punishment you will for him." Then the king said, "Go and strike this man in the morning with 100 spears." And they struck him in the morning with 100 spears. Then at noon the king asked, "How is that man?" "Sir, he is still alive." Then the king said, "Go and strike that man at noon with 100 spears." And they struck him at noon with 100 spears. Then in the evening the king asked, "How is that man?" "Sir, he is still alive." Then the king said, "Go and strike that man in the evening with 100 spears." And they strike him in the evening with 100 spears. What do you think, monks? Would the man experience pain and grief because of being struck with 300 spears? Venerable sir, that man would experience pain and grief because of being struck with even 1 spear, let alone 300. Then, taking a small stone the size of his hand, the perfectly enlightened one addressed the monks thus, "What do you think, monks? Which is the greater, this small stone that I have taken the size of my hand, or Himalaya, the king of mountains?" Venerable sir, the small stone that the perfectly enlightened one has taken, the size of his hand, is insignificant besides Himalaya, the king of mountains. It is not even a fraction. There is no comparison. So too, monks, the pain and grief that the man would experience because of being struck with 300 spears does not count beside the suffering of hell. It is not even a fraction. There is no comparison.
Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. I think you guys might actually understand it, is that the Buddha is explaining the pain that's experienced in hell, that this 300 spears being cast into the body, that's a mere fraction of the pain that you would experience actually by being reborn in hell. And he's helping you to understand that, because nobody would be interested in being there. But he's just explaining it, you see, very clearly. He's not doing it in a way that is helping you to experience any kind of guilt or shame or fear, anything like that. He's just explaining the natural laws of existence, because the Buddha experienced hell prior to that particular life. At different times, he was reborn into these various realms. He knows what hell is like, because he was actually there. So he did things in previous lives that were bad enough, if we would like to use that word, or unwise enough to get into hell. And having been in hell and having experienced that, he knew what it was like. So that's why he was able to explain it, and what would be experienced there if you were reborn into that realm. So that's what he's doing here, is using this analogy to help you to understand that. And then I'm not going to have you read all these things, Josh, because this is actually a description of each of those things. The porridge pot, the polished shell shave. It explains the pain and misery of the things that happen and go on in hell. The Buddha is explaining exactly what happens in hell through all these different things. The porridge pot? It's not porridge. Porridge pot is smashing the skull open, peeling off the scalp, putting a blazing hot iron with tongs in order to burst the brain out like over boiling pot. Yeah. So he's explaining it in detail, because he was there. He understood, what transpires there. So you can read these in the books, because you can get them for free if you'd like. You can read these. All right. So any questions on this one? No? It's pretty graphic, right? That's why I kind of gave you guys a heads up before class really got going, that, yeah, this is like explaining about hell. Here's some more. These are some more. I think we're going to end class here, but there's actually one particular thing, because I review these chapters before class, and I knew that you guys were going to see all of this stuff. This isn't something that you usually start learning from the very beginning. This is explaining the lifespan of hell, where he's explaining how long it is to be reborn in hell. This is the type of hell. There's different types of hells that he explains. Let me see. This is another type of hell that he explains. This is more talking about the suffering and the bondage in hell. What is this one? This one is helpful. Let's end on this one. This is 28. This will help you. Is there someone who would like to read this one? You're going to read again, Josh? Yeah, I can see on his face. He usually reads more than once.
It's like a quarter of the size.
Let's see how long it is. Is that too long? No. All right, well, I can just tell you then. I'll just summarize it, and then we'll end class there. Okay? So what the Buddha is describing here is that beings who are in hell, it's very rare for them to be reborn into the human realm and into the heavenly realm. They're going to need to be reborn potentially in hell multiple times, or in the animal realm or the afflicted spirit realm, before they ever get a chance to come into the human realm or heavenly realm again. So once you get into the hell realm or the animal realm, it's almost like being in a prison. It's not permanent. You will be reborn into other realms, but it's very challenging to get out of those realms. So now that you're in the human realm, you've done certain wholesome things enough in your previous lives that you've gotten to this human existence. And now that you're in this human existence, this is the ideal time for an individual to learn and practice and train their mind to be able to get to enlightenment, so that we're not reborn into these other realms. But the rebirth, as I mentioned, was never used as a way to guilt, shame, and fear you into getting to enlightenment. Instead, what the Buddha taught is he taught how to eliminate the painful feelings and all those other discontent feelings, so that you can experience the enlightened mental state. And as you're learning and practicing his teachings, you can see that this is occurring. So the Buddha isn't teaching you a bunch of beliefs to either incentivize you to do something and you get this wonderful, great life at the end of this life, like a great afterlife. And he's not teaching you a whole bunch of things to fear you into not going to hell. Instead, he's teaching you things today in this life. You're not seeing it here because these aren't the teachings, but he has these teachings where he teaches you how to train your mind so that you can experience results now in this life. And the more you practice his teachings of training the mind with meditation and other things, you'll be able to see the improved condition of your mind. So while here today, this particular section of the book is talking about hell, and if this is your very first time learning any of the teachings of the Buddha, it might be like, whoa, but just understand he has a very core central set of teachings that are going to significantly help you to improve the condition of your mind. And if you learn those, you'll be able to see the truth for yourself, that as you're learning them and practicing them, that the condition of your mind is improving and your relationships and all these other things are improving. So I think I'm just going to end class here rather than continuing to go through all of these things. You guys can read these on your own. And if you have questions, you can always ask me. I will help you. But I don't think it makes sense to go through all these different hells and help you to understand what all these different hells are. This is for someone who's kind of more along in their journey to enlightenment. Do you guys have any questions about anything that you would like to ask about? No? Let me just check online, see what the folks online are maybe asking. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there either. Okay, so what I'll do then is just end class by thanking you guys for coming to the temple and deciding that you'd like to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. As you would like to get started, I would encourage you to start with Volume 1. It's a much better place to get started. Volume 11 is something that people graduate into. We have a program on Sunday and Wednesday that is really helpful for someone just getting started. Tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching Eliminating Fears. Are you really scared? I'm going to teach you how to actually eliminate any fears. So if you're afraid of death, if you're afraid of spiders, if you're afraid of snakes, if you're afraid of anything, what I'm going to teach you tomorrow is going to be more of a traditional style of teaching, where I'm going to be here and I'm going to be teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching and helping you to understand how to train your mind to eliminate these fears. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have any fears in your mind at all, including the fear of death. And there's a certain tools and techniques that the Buddha shared to be able to teach you and help you to understand how to eliminate those fears. So you don't have to live with whatever fears you have. You don't have to live with those. You can overcome those. You can eliminate them. But if you don't have the wisdom and the tools of the techniques of how to do it, you wouldn't be able to do it. So you're more than welcome to come tomorrow, which is a much better kind of place to start for beginning students. That particular program on Sundays and Wednesdays. On Sundays, I use Volume 1 and I go chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter all the way through that. And we're in chapter 17 now, helping you to eliminate your fear. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation together. I'm going to teach you how to cultivate loving kindness in your mind through meditation. And then I open up to any and all questions that students have. And you can attend these here at the temple or you can attend online. And if there's anything that you would like to ask me, you're welcome to let me know after class. Sometimes students come over and have more of a private chat based on certain things that they have questions about our classes or our courses, our retreats, or anything that's going on in your life. You're welcome to come let me know. So thank you all for coming and have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.